By decree of Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, in the year of our Lord 1471, the army has been called to arms, the peasant levies called to assemble. But Edward of York has marched on London. He has taken the city and declared himself King of England. And now, by the name of God, we march to take back the capital. The House of Warwick rides with the House of Lancaster to defeat Edward and restore the true king, Henry VI, to the throne. Our army musters in Coventry, where thousands upon thousands of archers have joined our cause, and hundreds of noble knights are willing to do battle for the true King of England. But we have been told to prepare ourselves for a siege. For our plan is to besiege the walls of London, invade the city, and take the throne back. But those walls are thick. So we have also been told to prepare that. One of the biggest, most powerful siege engines in the world, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the Warwick Castle Trebuchet! This is Ursa, the bear. She stands at 18 metres tall and weighs 22 tonnes. And not only is she one of the biggest, most powerful trebuchets in the world, she is state-of-the-art in her design. Look, we've got wheels on the side of her. Those wheels mean that we use manpower to load her. No longer do we need to use the traditional method of loading a trebuchet, which is using animals, mostly horses and oxen, to tow down the throwing arm. Now, we have borrowed this technology from the medieval crane, the same cranes that have helped build huge structures around medieval Europe. Abbeys, churches, city walls and castles like our very own at Warwick. So we've taken the wheels from the cranes, put them inside our machines. So the technology that was once used to build castles can now be used to smash them down. So how does she work? Well, those two wheels are connected with the central axle. A rope is tied to the throwing arm and led down to the A-frame at the back. It is passed through a pulley. Then the rope is brought in this direction and connected to the central axle. The person in charge of the trebuchet is the trebuchet master, located at the back of the machine. With the trebuchet master is a crew of winders, 4 people, 2 to go inside each wheel. And their job is to simply walk inside those giant wheels, walking in this direction. Now their walking action turns the giant wheels and turns that axle, which winds the rope, wraps it around the central axle, and in turn pulls down the throwing arm and lifts that wooden box you can see slowly rising in the centre. That wooden box is the counterweight, the ballast, the source of our energy for our siege machine. And that counterweight box weighs 1 tonne when it's empty. What we have done is placed a further 4.5 tonnes of rocks and rubble inside that box. So you have just witnessed 4 people lifting a total weight of 5.5 tonnes. So let's give them a big cheer! Excellent work, and what a feat in medieval engineering. Now the arm is down and the trebuchet master has engaged the trigger. Now the trigger is simply a metal hook which is located on that A-frame at the back. Its counterpart is a metal loop which is on the throwing arm. So the arm is brought down in line with the A-frame and the hook is simply passed through the loop. This is our release mechanism, our trigger. But also, there is a shooting sequence for this trigger. So 2 safety implements will be placed. A metal pin is placed underneath the hook to lock it into position. And then a chain, which is led from the base of the trebuchet, is hooked to the end of the arm. Which means all 22 tonnes of Ursa's own weight is locking down her own throwing arm. And it needs to be locked down, for as you can see, the job of the winders is not over just yet. They have been ordered to split into 2 teams. 1 winder from each wheel steps out to operate a brake at the front, which is simply an 8-foot piece of oak at the base of each wheel. So now this leaves 1 winder remaining in each wheel. They must walk on for a second time, this time in this direction. Now the reason why they have to get back inside those wheels and walk the other way is because of that rope used to pull down the throwing arm and lift up the counterweight. That rope has now wrapped itself around the central axle. So, if the trebuchet master pulled the trigger at this stage, well then Ursa will be smashed to smithereens. The axle will be torn from the heart of the machine, thrown out to the back, and most likely decapitating our trebuchet master in the process. So the winders now have a very important job of walking off the slack, taking the rope from the axle, making sure that Ursa has a free-flowing arm. But they must be careful, not to take off all of the rope. We still need a small portion left on the axle, so we can start the whole winding and loading process once again. For when it comes to war and the siege, we must be shooting this machine at least once every 6 minutes, which makes life inside those wheels extremely uncomfortable. Being a trebuchet winder is regarded as one of the worst jobs in history, so let me explain why. When you're inside those wheels and you're walking in this direction, you not only have to walk the weight of the wheel, which weighs over a ton, you have to lift that 5.5 tons of ballast, so it's not a walk in the park. When you walk, you climb. You lift your knees and stride high. It's like walking up an ever-increasing hill. Very, very tough. But when you're on your own inside the wheel and you walk the other way, it's a different story altogether. That 1 ton of weight is still in the wheel, but it's not going against you, it's going with you. So this is where the wheel will speed up. There's only one of you needed inside the wheel as well, because there's no weight to lift. So this is where it will start to freewheel. If the wheel goes quick, you're going to go quick. And it will turn into a race between you and that wheel. And the wheel is going to win. You're the loser, because what will happen is you will fall inside that wheel and tumble around inside, hitting that central axle, and most likely breaking every single bone in your body. So this is why we have those brake operators at the front. They communicate with the winders in each wheel, making sure that they keep a safe, steady pace. So once every 6 minutes with our trebuchet. Now that's quite slow when compared to that of a cannon. Now, cannons can create a breach in a city wall. Exactly what we need. But once that breach is met, you then have to send in your own men. Soldiers to fight inside the city, through the streets and in the buildings. Now with close quarter, medieval urban warfare, you have to be prepared to lose a lot of your men. Perhaps half of your soldiers won't survive. Now Ursa gives us another option, because not only with trebuchets can we launch projectiles at city walls, but we can launch them over the city walls and attack inside. So, what can we throw from our trebuchet? Well, we can throw anything. Rocks, fire, people, dead animals. Now, a dead animal is a good choice if you want to fight a dirty war. If you don't want to bring down the walls, and if you want them to surrender, then if you find a rotting cow's carcass, perfect. Load that onto the machine and pull the trigger. When that body hits inside the city, the body will tear apart and rotten flesh will shower all over the place. Hopefully into the city's wells, their water supply. If we can contaminate that, well then they simply have to surrender. Bit of germ warfare and psychological warfare. If you capture any enemy soldiers, then just knock them out. Load them onto the trebuchet, wait until they wake up. Then pull the trigger and send them flying back home. And you'll know when they've landed, when they've stopped screaming. But the one thing that medieval man was most frightened of was fire. And most of the internal structures of a medieval city will be made of wooden thatch. So we can launch fireballs from our trebuchet. And if we can launch fireball after fireball and create a raging inferno within that city, well then, the enemy simply has a choice. They surrender or they burn. But our plan is to breach the city walls and destroy the internal buildings. To do this, we need to throw rocks. And we must test our machine now by shooting an 18-kilo rock using slingshots. Trebuchet Master calls, stone loaded. The rock has been placed into a sling bag, which is permanently attached to the throwing arm. They are both placed in the centre channel in the heart of the machine. The ball goes into the sling over the ball, and the top rope is led down to the pin at the end of the arm. Now at this stage you are almost ready for launch, but we still have those safeties attached. So the Trebuchet Master steps up to take off the chain. Then with a steady hand, she pulls out the firing pin. The Trebuchet is now live and ready to launch. The Trebuchet Master now steps off the machine to perform her final checks, ensuring her crew are away from the machine. For she alone will take responsibility for the launching of the rock. And when she's happy, she will take the trigger rope, stand back, and with a cry of "Have a care!" she will unleash hell. But we need to give our Trebuchet Master some help. So we are going to do this together. We are going to cue the Trebuchet Master. We're going to give a countdown from 10, and once we reach the end of that countdown, we'll give the command of loose. So, are you ready to count? Come on, you lot, this is war! Are you ready to count? Then let's do it! 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, loose! And we launch! There she goes, launching the rocket at 120 miles an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, the Warwick Castle Trebuchet! Now that is not achieved without an awful lot of hard work. So let's please hear a huge cheer and a round of applause for the Trebuchet Master and the crew! Fantastic, what a machine. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your day at Warwick Castle. And thank you so much for watching our Warwick Castle Trebuchet.